What is up, guys? Welcome back to another episode of my Jeep build series where we're turning this old rusty, crusty, worn out TJ into a rock crawling machine. The focus of today's video primarily is going to be all evolved around pulling that engine transfer case back out of the Jeep. We had everything set in there for mock-up. That way we could have our engine mounts and everything exactly where we wanted it so we could finish out that frame. Now that that's all done, if you watched previous videos, you can see me do all that work. But now that all that is done, we got to pop the motor out, get it freshened up, tuned up, ready to go back into the Jeep. That way, whenever it's in there, turn the key, fire it up. So we have some parts on order. We're going to pick up some parts from my buddy, and we're just going to keep knocking out this build. But we have some unfinished business. That door needs painted. So bear with me, time lapse coming. We're gonna knock this door out and then we're diving into the fun stuff, pulling that motor. So stay tuned, let's get it. And cut. Time lapse is over. Let's get into the fun stuff. Pulling that engine trans and transfer case out of the Jeep. All right, well, the grill and the bumper are off and we have complete access to the engine. We have to get the transfer case out and the transmission cross member loose first. We'll go ahead and slide the transfer case out and then it's just gonna be hooking up the picker to the engine, loosening up the mounts and popping that thing out of there. Quick work, easy. All right, let's talk transfer cases quick while I have it out of the Jeep. So this is a NP241J, but it's in the 4:1 ratio out of a Rubicon JK Wrangler. This was out of the early model, like the 2007 or so, back behind a 3.8 V6 engine. I was able to pick this up at my junkyard pretty cheap. The guys didn't necessarily know what they had. They figured it was just transfer case. The ratios to them didn't mean anything. So picked this thing up cheap. I figured it was a good alternative to an Atlas for now. The biggest downside is it is a chain-driven transfer case, not a gear-driven like an Atlas or a Dana 300. So I wouldn't say it's necessarily as strong as a gear-driven, and they do form a lot more wear, which this one does have. I believe it has a stretch chain in it. So the plan moving forward is before this ends up back in that Jeep, we're going to open up this case, take a look at the chain. It's definitely getting replaced, but I also want to look at the internals and make sure everything is up to snuff before we go shoving it back in. So the way that this is bolted to my Chevy Turbo 400 transmission is through a Novak adapter. They're pretty pricey, but still all in all, for what I have into the case and the adapter, it's still a third, maybe even a quarter of the price of an Atlas. So I'm not complaining there. The yokes on it are your traditional JK style yokes. I don't know if we're swapping over to like the TJ OR transfer case style yoke. your more traditional instead of the flange style, or not yet. That is still to be determined. But I had someone ask what transfer case I was using, how I was able to use it. So there it is, Rubicon with a no vac adapter. We're gonna put it behind the Jeep and hope it stays together. All right, switching it back up a little bit. We're going back to selfie mode, but transfer case is out. We just talked about it. The next order of business is pulling the engine and transmission out of the Jeep. That way we can start going over the engine as far as what maintenance, gasket seals, parts that we're gonna be throwing at that motor before it ends up back in the Jeep. Let's go ahead and pull it out. We'll talk about the little 4.8 that could. Shop dog. Well, as you can see, the engine is officially on the ground. Transmission's laying over there. And that's gonna wrap up tonight's video. Tomorrow we're gonna pick back up where we left off. We're gonna throw that up onto the engine stand and start going through this little 4.8 liter. Well, as you can see, the garage looks a little bit different. I got it cleaned up. It's actually 2 days after I filmed that last part. So I went ahead and got the engine apart from the trans and thrown up on the engine stand. That way we can start taking a look at it today. All right, now that we have the engine up on the engine stand, we can finally start talking about what I have and what my intentions are with this motor. As far as LS swaps go in Jeep, you have pretty much 3 different ways you can go about doing it. You can either do the high dollar option, which is to buy a crate motor straight from Chevy, Or you might know somebody that bought an engine and never finished a swap, but that's going to be the higher end of buying an engine, you know, multiples of thousands of dollars, 3, 4, 5, you know, the whole way up to 15 grand for a motor. If you want to go LS3, aluminum block, everything that way. As far as truck motors, you're down to 2 options there. You can either buy a complete truck and part it out, which is what I did, or you can go to a junkyard and pay just a few $100s, pull the motor yourself, pull exactly what you want, and be done with it. The reason I went with buying the whole truck to part out, it kind of fell into my lap. A guy at work had an old truck that the rear end came apart in, and he was no longer keeping the truck. It just sat around, and he was never going to do anything with it. So I was able to pick the truck up pretty cheap for about 500 bucks. I parted out what I could, and at the end of it, I actually made money and got the engine for free. The downside to this is, it's the little 4.8 liter Vortex, the smaller of the family, and it has almost 300,000 miles on it. The plus side is, I know the owner, I knew he took decent care as far as staying up to maintenance with it. Now he was hard on this thing. It's seen rev limiter, it's seen cold starts right to rev limiter, but I knew the engine ran and it sounded pretty healthy when I brought the truck to my house. So I'm not scared of this motor. I know its history, and I think it's going to be a perfect candidate to go in my Jeep. And if it does pop, it was free. Now, we are going to put just a little bit of money into this engine, and we're going to do it in smarter ways than not. A lot of guys, they'll buy these, they'll throw superchargers and turbochargers right on them, they'll just run until they pop. They run back to the junkyard, pick another one up for 200 some bucks, and you're golden. This one, I think for now we're going to stay naturally aspirated. We're just going to do some key upgrades that I think are important just to kind of help the longevity of this engine in my Jeep. Pretty much we're going to start off with doing a water pump on it. And while we are doing the water pump, we may throw a cam into it. We're going to do a front main seal, rear main seal. There's a trunnion bearing upgrade that's really good for these motors. Basically, where the rocker is now, it is a needle bearing setup, and whenever you do this upgrade, it actually allows that rocker to rotate farther without the fear of your needle bearings coming apart, ending up down the motor and completely wiping it out. So we're going to do that trunnion bearing upgrade. The heads on it are fairly decent. I have one exhaust manifold that snapped off that we're going to go ahead and have to remedy. Valve covers are staying. What else? We'll probably do an oil pump on the front of it. I feel like that would be a wise investment. And if we have the cam mount to replace it, we're probably going to throw a timing chain on it as well. Let me bring you guys a little bit closer and we'll start walking around the engine. All right, so like I said, this motor has near 300,000 miles on it. If you look at it, this side of the block, whenever I first got it, I went ahead and threw some paint on it, but I never really deflaked it before I hit it with the paint. So whenever I hit it with compressed air, it went ahead and blew some of the stuff off. When I pulled the exhaust manifolds off, all of them surprisingly came out easy, except for him. So I'm hoping I'll be able to go ahead and weld a nut on that and extract that bolt without too much of a headache. All these spark plugs broke free nice and easy. Whenever I pulled the intake, I went ahead and taped up the cathedral runners on this, just so no more debris got down and through. And the rear main, surprisingly, looks pretty good. I did no cleanup on the back of that engine, and really isn't dripping too bad. Now this has aluminum heads on a cast block. Cool thing about this, let me see if I can find the tag. These blocks are actually stamped 4853. So technically it is the exact same block between those two engines. The only time it changes is once you jump up to the 6 liter. So the engine itself is not in terrible shape. It has high mileage, but I have good faith that with a little bit of preventative maintenance, we'll be able to get this thing back up and running, and it should last pretty long inside that Jeep. We'll see how long it lasts inside that Jeep. I'm not going to be easy on this thing, but like I said, I really have no money into it besides the maintenance that we're going to sink into this. So I'm not scared, or I'm not sad if it blows apart. All right, so now that the engine is pushed over here closer to my welder, I'm gonna finish up the video with trying to extract that broken bolt from the head. Now, I did actually have two other ones that broke off, and I was able to go ahead and weld a nut onto those and spin it back out. But this one was pretty stubborn and snapped right off. So hopefully we can get it to bite again with a little bit of weld and it'll come right out. Worst case, we're gonna have to go ahead and drill it and retap. We went big this time. Finally, that was the secret. Well, there's a story for you. If at first you don't succeed, continue to try and you will. We were able to get it out and not destroy the threads or the head. Awesome. All right, guys. Well, I think getting that bolt out is going to end this video. I don't have any parts yet to start diving into the engine, so that's going to come in time. I have a feeling maybe the next 2 or 3 videos is when we're actually gonna start working on that engine and getting it ready to drop in. The next video is gonna be pretty fun. We're actually taking a trip out to see my buddy Bill out in Westchester, Pennsylvania, and I have a surprise guest coming with me. If you guys like watching Jeep builds on YouTube, the guy that's coming with me, you'll definitely want to check out. He is building a sick Jeep. If you know, you know, but if you don't, make sure to check out the next video. So engine build coming, progress on the Jeep is coming. I appreciate the view. Drop a comment. Let me know if I should keep this thing mild or if we should go wild with it. I'm leaning towards stock, but anything's up in the air. So appreciate it, guys. We'll see you next time. Thanks.